Have you ever experienced something so crippling in your life that has made you feel broken? I have. Are you someone who has a giving heart but is struggling to feel good themselves? Are you consistently putting your needs aside to take care of everyone else? If so, you're not alone. Giving starts with giving to yourself so that you are able to give of yourself to other people. Isn't it time you took back control and discovered what makes you tick? Join me in my journey and find out how you can feel better about yourself, live your best life, and share that with others. Thinking of yourself, it doesn't make you selfish, it makes you brave. I'm Nelia, and this is the Giving Starts With You podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Giving Starts With You podcast. I'm your host, Nelia Hutt. Thank you again for joining me and a beautiful new friend I have just met, Deborah Hawkins. Thank you for joining us, Deborah. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad that we were able to connect. You're awesome. So I'm excited. I want to start right away. So I'm just going to let you guys know a little bit more about my special friend here. So Deborah Hawkins, she has been blogging on gratitude and mindfulness since 2010, posting over 500 reflections on everyday experiences that have elevated her mood and tips on how to keep gratitude top of mind. So important. She's also the author of 2 books, The Best of No Small Thing, Mindful Meditations, and Practice Gratitude, Transform Your Life, Making the Uplifting Experience of Gratitude Intentional. Love those titles, beautiful. These books demonstrate a fresh approach to a gratitude practice that is fun, authentic, and confidence boosting. In her early 50s, Deborah started writing reflections on everyday experiences that she could appreciate as a way to lift herself out of depression. And now she's very humble and wants to teach people how to develop their own personal gratitude themes so they can live happier lives. And the reason why I invited Deborah on today, and I'm so happy that she accepted, is because this show is all about getting us to live better, getting us to live happier. You know, life is so short. So if we can help depression and our mood through learning about gratitude, do you know how much that would change our life? So I am so excited to have you on here, Deborah. Thank you so much. Where are you tuning in from?
I live in Chicago.
I've always wanted to go there.
Well, you have a place to stay now. If my dog India will let you take a room.
Oh, India, I love that name. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love deep dish pizza, so yeah.
No shortage of that here.
So Deborah, oh, gratitude, what a beautiful thing to speak about. Can you please tell us, I know this is probably a question you get asked a lot, but in order for us to understand how this all began, so you started in 2010. What made you want to start blogging and talking about gratitude? What was your journey like before that? Like what brought you to that day?
I really think that gratitude is not only important because the research says it's powerful. It really made a big difference in my life, and it really happened slowly. And I think my approach is very different than what is commonly thought of as a gratitude practice. And I think the element, my approach of being mindful is very different than keeping track and writing like in a journal, like 15 things that you were happy about that day, you know, which is a wonderful way to start thinking about positives, but it really puts the power on external circumstances. You're just responding to things that went your way. And I think the power of gratitude is in finding these, knowing yourself so well that you know how to find these things in whatever circumstance you're in. Not that you're denying, difficulties or challenges, but it all comes from within you. Not because you got a great parking place or because, the waitress served your steak just the way you like it. It just comes from you.
Mm.
And I think that's really important. And the way I explain that it changed my life is very important to understand a little my backstory. So I'll talk a little bit about my childhood. I was the youngest of three daughters, and there was like a family drama that I was born into. I had a sister who died before I was born in a car accident. And my mother, of course, was grieving. And she was able to have another daughter, like not too long after the car accident. And then a year later, I came along.
Oh,
I
that's a
was
lot.
I was like the accident. And in some ways, I don't blame my mother in that. She was dealing with her own stuff, but she treated my sister that was 1 year older than me a lot differently than me. And I used to like be beaten by my sister, and I went through some things, and my mother was not about to intervene because it was too important to her to maintain the status quo, to make my other sister, who was 1 year older, feel like okay, that nothing would bother her. So I came to two conclusions early in life. One, that I wasn't worth very much because I certainly wasn't worth being protected by my mother. And the other thing was nobody would ever listen to me because I asked to stop the abuse, but it didn't change. So I grew up not having a very good self-esteem. I grew up trying to please other people, to think that would lead to like some protection and some like that people would go to bat for me, and some, they would go to bat for me basically. And I was often depressed as I grew up. So I didn't have a good career. I didn't have healthy relationships with men. I had friends, but I had like a lot of issues. So I would go back and forth between doing different jobs. I also had a very creative side that I was a writer, but I wasn't writing enough. It was very hard to take the rejection, I guess, involved in being a writer, which is normal because of the other things I went through.
Absolutely.
And it was very hard. So I would go through like different jobs, and I had just moved to another city to try to start a new career, and it didn't work, and I moved back to Chicago. I had a car accident. I couldn't walk for a couple months, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't go on this way. It was not that I was suicidal, but I just like didn't know how I could live without joy in my life. And then I came up with this idea, well, I'll write about small things from my daily life that I could appreciate. And this got me thinking about little positive things that were very accessible to me. It also meant that I now had a purpose for writing. So it was good that way. And I started writing these little posts, and I decided to make a blog of them because it was a wonderful thought that maybe someday I would have people reading what I wrote. So I did this for a while, and after a few years, I read all the posts that I wrote, and I said, I tended to write about a handful of themes, like beauty or belonging or humor, or, these were my personal gratitude themes. I came up with 12, so I called them my grateful dozen. And I concluded that everybody has their own personal themes, and that gratitude is much easier to step into if people know what really uplifts them, what makes them feel good, what they could feel good about. And that enables them to see that in the world that actually is.
Wow. That's so beautiful in so many ways. Like, first of all, I'm so sorry that you had that experience, especially with somebody that you're supposed to trust and you're supposed to feel safe with. So I'm so sorry. I could see the pain when you were telling that story. Um, of course you grew up feeling like that. How could you not? You know what I mean? Yeah, but wow, look at you. Like, you are this amazing woman, like amazing human being. You've come so far despite these things that happen, and yeah, you're really going to change a lot of people's lives, because what you're doing is so important to share. It's so hard to talk about these things. And I think that even though we all have different stories, we all have times in our lives where we feel crappy, where we feel people don't love us, where we feel we're not good enough, and that perhaps we don't deserve anything different. When you feel like that for so long, it's very hard to start believing in yourself, So when you were saying that you were looking to relationships and different things to feel like you belonged and to feel, I think we all do that in a way. So even though, I don't know, I'm so happy to be talking about this stuff, because nobody wants to talk about it. Pain is hard.
Well, it is, but there's something maybe encouraging I could share, which is just to start from wherever you are.
Mm.
And all I could do was a very little, like if I could focus on 2 things every week that I really liked and get into them a little bit more and really understand why I like that, or why those things made me feel good. It really gave me something to build on. So as part of my philosophy now, it has become important not to identify what you don't like, what you don't want, because then you're still thinking about that thing. It's like, not this, but you're still thinking about this. So I think it's really important to identify what feels good and set your mind on building on those things, and paying attention and being mindful every step of the way, because there's no perfect answer. Life is a trial and error proposition.
Oh no, I got the hiccups now. Pardon. But there's so much, like, in what you were saying, like there's so much I want to talk about. I love that you approach it in a different way, because most of the time when we think of gratitude, we think of writing all the things that, as you put it, went our way. Sometimes, recently I've learned that maybe it's the smaller things that not necessarily happen to you, but that you realize that you may not realize at another time, right? And start writing that. But I'm interested to hear, how you go about this. But sometimes, like you said, you almost have to hit rock bottom, like that day where you said, I just want to feel joy and I can't live my life without feeling that. I think there are a lot of people out there that don't have this gratitude practice. And I think maybe they're resistant to it. But when you get to a point in your life where you have no choice, like you were saying, in that time of your life, it's like, you've made a decision. I can't do this anymore. I want to live differently. And I did the same thing. And I think when you get to that rock bottom part is when you can start this journey, right? So when somebody's ready to learn about gratitude, Yeah, tell us how you get to this thing.
The first thing I recommend is practicing being in the moment.
Mm.
So it's not that you're going to live that way all the time, but when you notice yourself actually feeling good, you need to stop and ask yourself, what's going on here? What are the details of why I'm feeling good? How does this compare to something else? You know, what can I do with this? And the more you understand yourself and what really lifts your spirits, the more you could, I believe that gratitude is not about what happens to you. It's about what you recognize you already have.
Oh, I love that. It's beautiful.
And it's a very different way maybe of looking at things. People like talk about saying please and thank you and being grateful. And again, it's not bad. It's like a good way to think about there are positive things going on. So it's a good thing, but it's not, to me, not approaching the power of gratitude. When you realize that you have that power in you, just purely by being who you are and noticing that what you are is special, it's like huge. And I tell people that's like an often underlooked benefit of being grateful or living from a grateful place. In some ways, living from a grateful place is about celebrating who you are, because it's like declaring to yourself, at least, that what you value really matters, because that's what's behind you feeling good. And when you know that what you feel really and what you value matters, it changes a lot.
Mm. Even if people don't like we were talking earlier before we hit record about it being internal, right? And not external. Like we shouldn't expect, people will never praise us the way we need to. We need to do it from ourselves, right? So if you're feeling lost and then the end result from being grateful is you want to feel that you love yourself and that you're enough and that you're a great person, there's work that has to be done in between, right? It's not a
Very
fast. Mm-hmm.
And very much. But I think the first level is really understanding yourself and what you value, and committing yourself to practicing noticing what makes you feel good.
That's a great idea. It sounds simple, but if you don't think about it, you don't know. I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah, I like people say, well, how can you be grateful when there's all these terrible things going on, like the pandemic and people dying or strange politics? I go, you're right, there's a lot of challenges in the world. However, and I don't recommend denying those things at all. I think it's important that people feel sad or people feel their grief or whatever they're feeling. But I think it's important to know that you can also enjoy something at the same time. So even when you're going through something difficult or challenging, there are still things that you can see in your daily life to be happy about.
It's so important what you're saying. It's so important. You know, as you're talking and you're saying that, I'm remembering me, and I suppressing feelings for so long and feeling guilty when I forgot and being happy for 5 minutes or laughing. And I'm like, catch myself laughing. I'm like, how dare I laugh when I'm supposed to be so sad? So I'm so happy that you said that, because I think a lot of people will connect with you there.
There was a strange thing during the pandemic in the earlier stages. I used to watch a TV news show on one of the cable networks, and the broadcaster, the woman that would run this little segment called Lives Well Lived. And she would do it like a 5-minute or 2-minute like special on somebody who died. And I felt like I was grieving with the whole world, like this Black teenager in Florida in his white, had his picture up, and he was wearing his white prom jacket tuxedo. And I felt terrible. And yet I was somehow, one of my themes, personal themes for being grateful is belonging. So somehow being in this, witnessing this show with millions of other people made me feel grateful still that I could like share this and appreciate somebody who was a stranger to me, appreciate his life in some way. So again, this doesn't make things all better, but I could still live with some feelings, some confidence that there is something worthwhile in so many aspects of life.
Thank you. It's beautiful. So after once you start to recognize, like, because sometimes I'll catch myself, like I'm supposed to be sad, right? The world tells me I'm supposed to be sad. And because I'm an empath, I have this heart, right? That doesn't stop working. When I feel happy, I'm very happy. When I feel sad, I'm very sad. So when the world tells us we're supposed to feel sad during the pandemic, but I catch myself being so grateful for so many things in the pandemic, people think I'm crazy. People were complaining about being home, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, you have more time with your family. Like, how can you change that in your mind,
Well, the first thing is that your feelings are yours. That's my view. And I probably didn't spend the early part of my life recognizing that if I feel sad or feel hurt or whatever, they're my feelings. And I could either express them or turn them into depression. If I can't be angry outwardly, I would get depressed. But my feelings are mine. And if somebody else is angry because you're not feeling the way they would want you to, or the way they do, they're just looking for validation about their feelings. That's their that's their bag. It's not yours.
It's so true. It's like bullies, right? It's the same thing happens when people aren't in tune with themselves and they have a lot of work to do and they may not recognize it yet. They put everything on everybody else, right? And they make us feel small, and nobody has a right to do that. Nobody has a right to make us feel that way. And I think the more we get to know each other, like what you're saying, the stronger we become and the less we care about other people's opinions, which I think is a beautiful thing. As you said, I'm so happy that you're saying it's okay to be sad about something, but yet be grateful at the same time. That's very healthy.
I think so. And I probably couldn't hold those two things in my consciousness at one time at certain points in my life. But I realized, because of my philosophy and spiritual leanings, that life is like a play. There's like good things and challenging things happening all the time. And it will always be that way. But it's up to us sometimes to choose what we want to give our attention to.
And you're the playwright, so you get to choose.
That's right. We all do. We all can choose. And it's like not to lose compassion or caring about other people,
right?
And extend whatever consideration to them and be patient, because some people will not get this for a while. But I think people will change not so much based on what you tell them to do, but based on how you show them it's affected you. So
Mm.
when people see you that are at a more confident state, they'll go, what's she drinking? What is she doing? What is she doing? Give me some of that. So it's like,
Yeah.
to be strong, you don't have to be a bully. You don't have to have a military parade. You just have to know what you know.
Mm. Yes.
And that really, people can see that.
Mm. And being compassionate toward other people doesn't mean you let them walk all over you. It's two completely different things. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's important not to let people walk over you rather. It's really important to learn how to express yourself in a way that's not perpetuating the blame game.
Mm.
And just the other week, I got a call from a doctor that I quit because he wasn't listening to me. I go, you might be a great expert. You know the symptomology, you know the research, you know what is common for everybody, but that doesn't work for me. And I
No.
never felt you listened to my symptoms. So I think it would be good for your patients. I'm not putting this on an online review. I'm not trying to like upset your career or whatever, but I recommend taking being understanding of what your patients go through. For them, it's not about your research. It's about their symptoms, what they're actually experiencing.
I love that.
And I told him this, and I didn't expect to hear from him at all because he was like a very smart but arrogant doctor, like,
Yes.
do it my way. And he didn't actually apologize. He wanted to know, I told him I found another doctor, and I told him like what I'm doing. And he asked me whether we were doing something similar to what he prescribed. He was still very attached to him being smart.
Yes.
But he said, I will take your feedback into consideration, thoughts, when I deal with somebody. So even though it was not like an apology for hurting me, that I figured out a proper and non-blaming way to express this observation I made.
And good for you, because that could be challenging, to speak up.
It was. And for many years, it was one of my challenges to speak up in general, because I was convinced it didn't do any good.
That your opinion didn't matter.
And my opinion didn't matter. And that's part of what this phase of my life is about. So I've written these books. I have this theory, and I have made myself more even in temperament and more optimistic, but I still am going through trying to feel that I can speak and somebody's listening. And there has been something about being a podcast guest, actually, now that I have something to say, now that I have an experience to share that I think can affect other people, there's something about having these conversations that is very healing to me. Somebody really cares what I have to say.
I care about what you have to say. I think you're remarkable. And sometimes I want to say to people, and we all make mistakes, and we're all learning every day. But one thing that I've learned to do is the opposite of what I used to do. So before, if I felt that I wasn't being listened to, I would shut down. But now, and not in a bullying way, but now when I feel that, I actually speak up more. So I become louder, and I advocate for myself, which was the last thing I ever thought of doing before. And it's very empowering, but you can do it in a kind way. You know, like when you were talking about your doctor, I had a similar experience and I didn't speak up, but I did get another physician. But it was night and day. And my new physician, I actually said to them, you know, I want to say thank you, because the more comfortable you make me feel, the more I'm going to be honest about my body and what's happening to me. Because when you're a person that has mental health issues, I was, you know, I wasn't diagnosed with anxiety and depression for a very long time, but because I didn't share. And the physicians that were only there to, you know, to cure things and not really listen to what was happening, they missed that. And so you go untreated sometimes for a long time. But when you find somebody who finds the humanity in being a physician and takes that extra step to listening, and it's not just doctors, takes that extra step to listening, and you actually feel comfortable, then I think you get diagnosed a lot quicker too, because, and the help comes faster because you're more comfortable in sharing. Do you know what I mean? Do you agree with that?
I do. I think it's not only doctors, but all sorts of contracted services
Yeah.
that people really could learn about listening more, because they might want to like provide a good solution. They might have their best intentions at heart, but they also very often want to do things quickly, or they might presuppose what the solution is before everything comes out. And sometimes the solution really has to requires you to learn everything that has to come out over time. And it doesn't happen like as a quick fix. So I think that's important. We could all listen. And if we don't think we understand, we need to ask questions to get more clarity, because you're not doing anybody any good by saying saving face, by pretending like you got it the first time when you really didn't. It makes a solution easier to come to because all the right information is out, but it really adds to protects the relationship, because you show respect for the other person needing to express it. It's almost as important as the information itself, that there was actually a two-way communications.
Yeah. And sometimes if the person is having a hard time communicating and we keep interrupting them, like I'm bad at that sometimes, but it's not because I don't want to listen. It's because I get so excited and I forget what I'm going to say, but I'm trying to become a better listener. So if I do interrupt anybody who comes on here, I'm very sorry. I am actively working on this. But I feel like sometimes we also need to listen to what's not being said and watch body language too, right?
I definitely think so. I'm really happy you do this as a Zoom conversation, because even if 60% of the people listen as a podcast, listen as audio, the fact that I could actually see you and get encouragement from you makes the conversation easier.
Oh, and it's not easy for me. I got to tell you, I'm very introverted. I speak up and I speak a lot about things that I'm passionate about. But besides that, I'm happy. Like I could spend a whole week in solitude and not speak to anybody. I'm quite happy with that and I don't get bored. Whereas before I would become lonely, but I've grown now. But I also know the pain of loneliness. So, but anyways, that's another topic. But when I first started doing the podcast, I didn't do video. And because I was afraid of how I would look and what my background would be like. And none of those things matter. And as you can tell, I'm still not that professional. You know what I mean? But I find that when I started doing the video, it was easier to talk to people and I could connect with them better. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I love it. It's amazing because I don't know, I'm grateful for that, you see. So the first step was like catch yourself when you're happy and be like, hey, I haven't felt this in a while. Why am I feeling this? Right? What's making me happy in the moment? Because you may not think it could be something so small. Like I was out the other day and I saw like an act of kindness and I was in such a bad mood and it just made me kind of like my heart just kind of went, you know? And I'm like, I'm feeling happy now, like just from watching something. So I love that you said you have to notice, right? So you can get to know yourself better. So what's another thing that we can do to bring us down that noticing and getting to know ourselves better?
Something I do when I do a workshop is revisit a peak experience.
Hmm.
I recommend people close their eyes and think of a special memory. It could be on vacation, it could be time with their family or a special friend, and think of an actual circumstance and then unpack that memory a little bit. So to understand what it was about that memory that really lingers so much, why it sticks with you 30 years later. And like I use an example sometimes, I have a pet and a lot of people have pets, but the reason having a pet might be a source of gratitude for me could be different than why it might be a source of gratitude for somebody else. So to go into this, whether the peak experience is about my pet or just that I have a pet, but go into like a memory or a thought about something that makes you feel good. And if I take the example of having a pet, I could say, well, the pet makes me feel good because it's about being physically close. And I live alone, and that's really could be an important thing. Or it could be like getting permission from this pet to be spontaneous and to play. So it could be like a lot of different things. It could be having a routine, which I might not do if there wasn't somebody else in my household
That's
that
so true.
required this. So if I go into my thinking a little bit more about, well, this is a truth. I'm grateful for this. Why am I grateful for this? And really understand that, it puts things, to me, it suggests broad themes that you could actually apply to other situations. So feeling like physical closeness or touch, or feeling like you have a loyal companion, or feeling like
Somebody's counting on you.
you have a routine, or that somebody is counting on you. It doesn't just apply to your pet. It could apply in all sorts of situations. So when I talk about like being in the course of life, being at the store, or in the park, or driving, and I say, I'll ask myself, how are any of my gratitude themes showing up here? And I say, oh, I'm fulfilling an errand for somebody, I'm doing a routine. I can feel good about that. Or I might say, I'm shopping for something that is like an indulgence for me. And maybe that's a theme of mine. So I could actually notice that if I take these broad themes that my memories or my self-awareness suggests, and really analyze them and crystallize them into broadly applicable themes, I'm equipped to find gratitude in more places because, and it's genuine to me. It's not suggested by my mother or my pastor or somebody or my teacher or best friend. It comes from my own experience. And I think that's very powerful. So if I know what my themes are, if you know what you're looking for, it becomes so much easier to see them.
I love that. It sounds like you're saying you have to connect with the feeling, not the action.
That's probably true. To connect to the feeling and
So like if I'm going on a vacation, if I'm thinking back to a time, like I have this moment when I went on this trip to the Mediterranean, and it's in my book. And it wasn't the fact that I was in the Mediterranean, and it wasn't the fact that I was on a ship sitting down. It was the fact that it was 6 in the morning. I was completely alone on a ship, felt like I was alone, where it would normally be like 3,000 people on this ship. Everybody was still sleeping. I was up, the sun was coming up. I was writing in my journal, and I felt this moment of peace. I remember this like it was yesterday. So when I think of that, I'm not going to think, oh, I was on vacation doing this, this, and that. I'm going to think of the feeling that I felt and how good it made me feel.
I think that's wonderful. And I think you might even go into that experience a little more to possibly uncover other themes that you journal every day. Why did this day feel especially, why did it stick in your memory? So I think the
And I
fact
think I
that you were
know.
going on
Yeah.
an adventure, you didn't know what was going to happen to you exactly. Like you had an itinerary, but you had a spirit of adventure at the time. Or you
Yes.
maybe invested in something that you might have been normally cheap to yourself about, and you decided to go on vacation anyway. And these, I don't know the actual circumstances, but you could go into this memory a little more. It obviously affected you
Funny.
a lot.
It's
And
funny. Mhm. Sorry,
and think,
I'm listening to you and it's like you're talking my language.
and if you like go into this, especially if you journal and if you unpack this, you could really identify a few things that probably made this stick with you this long. And if you could think of how you might express those things as a 2 or 3 words, which I consider a theme. I'm not making a big story about it. It's like you could see that in other situations. And that's so wonderful if you know like 6 themes you have where you have felt grateful. And I bet you that you probably have other situations in your life that you have wonderful memories that were similar gratitude buttons.
I love what you're teaching because you're saying, why were those moments? Like as you were talking, I'm thinking, what was it? And I figured it out. You've helped me figure that out today. So thank you. Can I share what I've discovered in
Please do.
hearing you talk?
I'm curious.
So
Very happy it makes sense to you.
yeah, so I always wanted to journal, but never took the time to do it because I never took the time for me. So the fact that I was sitting there, like this was just before I started my business. And this was one of the big moments that I decided that I was worth more. And I started to come out of my depression was this day on this ship in that moment. And it's because I gave myself the time. My family was sleeping. I didn't need to worry about my husband, my son. I didn't need to worry about anything that was going on. I felt free for the first time in a long time. And even though I was writing, I had wanted to write for like 6 months, but never gave myself the time. So that's part of it too, is make like just feeling that you're important enough to take that time, I guess. So I'm realizing that that is huge for me because that put me on a journey of starting what I'm doing now. It was right around that time.
One of my themes is self-appreciation.
Mhm.
So I think that's really important to me because for most of my life, I didn't think about being kind to myself. And when I demonstrate taking myself into consideration, that I have certain feelings and my feelings are important, when I treat my own feelings as being important, I want to recognize that. And those little moments when I do recognize that is something I'm grateful for.
Mm. What a beautiful thing. Oh, if we could all just learn to feel that way about ourselves. Sometimes we're our hardest enemies and we're the toughest. And it's not our fault. Sometimes this was taught to us, either we had too much of something or not enough of something. That, we're created by our experiences and the way we grow up. And yeah.
I sometimes use, because I have a writing and reading background, I sometimes use the analogy of reading a story that doesn't have a very reliable narrator. So when we were children, our story was determined by our parents, or our family, or our classmates. And maybe they weren't the best narrators because they didn't understand things. They didn't understand things, or they were just concerned with themselves at a certain time. And we didn't understand, well, they were having a bad patch or whatever. So it was very difficult. So we interpreted our life from a bad narrator. And it's like, we don't have to think that. We don't have to conclude that what they say is true.
Absolutely. Some people might say they're too busy for gratitude. Do you think this is absolutely something you have to make time for?
Well, there was a Benedictine monk called David, I think he's still alive actually, David Steindl-Rast, and he did a TED Talk that was pretty famous back in 2013 or 2014. He also did an Oprah interview. He said, if you want to be happy, be grateful. So I think I don't want to, threaten somebody, be grateful or else these bad things are going to happen to you. That's ridiculous. But I will go out on a limb and say most people want to be happy. And happiness is kind of elusive. It's kind of hard to be sure you're really there. Or we think of happiness as a blissed out moment, and we ruin it because we're afraid we're going to lose it. Happiness is so loaded. So I think of being happy as being able to go back to a state of gratitude all the time.
So beautiful.
I think that's like contentment. It's something within my control, is to go back to this state of being grateful. Because you don't think about losing it. If there's something that makes you happy or something that you're grateful for in the moment, it doesn't mean you can't be grateful for something else 5 minutes from now. It's like you can't lose it. You can't lose, once you know how to get there, you can't lose the path.
No, thank you for that, for sure. Happiness is such an internal thing, and it's funny because you can almost predict when you see people laughing and just being overly happy that it's not real. Like, it's just, you can almost predict that that person is really hurting and they're trying to cover it up, because nobody is happy all the time. And I think that that's important for us not to strive for that, but to have like this peace and calm in your own body. I think it's such a beautiful thing. And I think we should all strive to have that feeling.
I think happiness as a high, as a point of feeling bliss, is wonderful when it happens, because it gives you a little perspective. It gives you a frame of reference, like that you could actually handle all this joy. That's wonderful to know that you could experience this, but it's like, there's nothing like being confident
Mm,
You could maintain a good positive mood most of the time, that you have something to share and
mhm,
that other people care about you.
mm. It's so great.
Pretty simple.
Oh, where can we find your books? They sound like they're amazing.
Well, thank you. The Best of No Small Thing is basically a collection of some of my favorite blog posts from the first 10 years of blogging. And Practice Gratitude, Transform Your Life is a little workbook on the process. On my website, there's a link to the books and more explanation about them. They're only available from online retailers because they self-published. I don't have a big distribution network or whatever.
Same
So
with
it's
me.
not only Amazon, but
Yes.
anybody where you could get online books online, you could buy these books. You
Great.
could also click through from my website. I also encourage people to go to nosmallthing.net, and you could read a couple of my blogs for nothing and get
They're beautiful. I've visited and it's great.
an idea of what I try to do and how I try to practice. And I don't want to really tell people what to do. I just tell them what I've done and provide examples of how I do my journaling and what it means to me. So I think that's wonderful. I'm also giving a free talk this month on writing a love letter to yourself. Information is on the website on my calendar page, and I'm doing Helium for Your Heart classes, which is a 2-session class on what I refer to as intentional gratitude. So the first class is about understanding how to develop your own themes. And in the second session, we just look at a lot of slides. I say, if you know 4 or 6 themes of yours, let's look at these slides and see how you might be grateful in this situation.
Sounds very helpful, very hands-on. I love that. So I know I was looking at your website. It's beautiful. I love it. Everything is on there. Now, how has gratitude, like how much has practicing gratitude helped you with your depression? And like, where are you now?
Oh, it's it's really changed me quite a bit, because and it still is continuing to change me. Like I talked about, like how important it is to speak out. So it takes a while. It takes some evidence. It takes being mindful. It takes noticing that people are okay with it. If I say I don't like this, if I express my boundaries or what I like and don't like, I have to go through feeling okay about this and building on it. But I feel much more able to express how I feel. I feel much more able to, I'm much more resilient. So
Mm,
if I get depressed, which I do,
mhm.
I feel more able to find something internally, not just distraction, to bring me up again. So I think it's really important. And I have 2 journaling practices now. One is I write 5 ways that I want to acknowledge myself for from
Mm,
the day before, because I think it's important to know myself that I'm worthwhile. And the other thing I'm doing, just started recently, is writing down feeling encouraged.
mm.
And it's wonderful to think about that the world is not against you. That little thing is like, they didn't run out of the thing you ordered at McDonald's or whatever. It could be a little thing, but to take note of little things that are still feeling encouraging
Mm,
is keeps giving me anyway, hope about things.
If we only celebrate the big things, we'll be depressed a lot because those big things, they don't come very often. We're always looking for the next best thing around the corner. And then when we reach that, we're looking, it's not good enough. And we keep going and keep going, and keep going. I think that's one of the reasons it's so great, because you can always find, no matter how bad your day is, it could be challenging, and you'll get better at it.
Right.
But, maybe the first few days you won't be able to, you can't think of something. But the more you practice it, I'm assuming the better you get at it. And what a gift that is.
I want to actually make a point of the word practice, because I think of practice in a very different way, than Western thought, that if you practice something, it's for mastery. It's in order to get better at something. To me, practice is just about showing up for yourself. So if you practice gratitude, you're just putting the intention out that you will be looking for things that lift your spirits and things you could appreciate. It's not with intention that I try to get better at this. It does become easier the more I do it, but I'm not trying to be perfect at something.
Right.
I just want to show up for myself.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's great. I love that way of thinking. Thank you. I'm gonna quote you on a couple of things. As we've been talking, I've been writing down a couple of little scribbles, and with the timestamp, because there's some things I want to quote you on. Yeah, it's fantastic. I love this so much. Sometimes I ask my guests, when we're getting close to ending the interview, and I want to ask you this question. What would you say is the biggest gift you have ever given to yourself or invested in yourself, that changed ultimately the way you felt about who you are?
Oh, wow. I think one of the gifts, I don't know, the word biggest is really, there's a lot of pressure on that.
Yes.
So I don't know if I could really answer as the biggest or the most
Or an impactful.
The most impactful. But I will say, investing in putting these books together and having them published was an important step for me, to say, oh, I have something that could be worthwhile.
Absolutely. And I know I just met you, but you absolutely do. Your message is beautiful, and you explain it so well, where we can feel, your journey as well. So thank you so much for sharing your personal story and showing us how things are now, so we can see the transformation. It's difficult sometimes to talk about certain things, but then when you've gone through them, all you want to do is help other people, right? And I can see that with you, that you're really genuine about that. So thank you for coming and talking to us about this. I think it's going to really help. Nobody knows what they're doing in this life. We all just need to give each other some tips and some suggestions.
It's really very inspiring lately. Part of the no one will ever listen to me syndrome was enhanced by the opinion that you have to get a master's degree, or you have to be a therapist, or you have to do certain, have certain credentials. And it's my brain works pretty good. I could figure things out. And there are other people like me who just want to share what they've learned. And it's really an interesting time we live in, relative to technology and media and ways to get messages out, that I'd like to think that it's not that important. It's not everything that I don't have a PhD, but I have something that maybe somebody could use.
Yeah, it's so true. I've said before on this show, and I'll say it again, I would rather, go see, if I had to go for therapy, I would rather see somebody who was smart but had the experience, personal experience, who has been through pain, than somebody who is brilliant with all the credentials, who has no idea what it feels like to be me.
Yeah, I don't want to like diss people who have
No, and I'm not trying to do that.
but feeling that somebody could empathize with me does matter.
Yes, that's a great way to say it. I think absolutely. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to get out here today to the listeners?
No, but if you come to Chicago, I'll take you out for pizza.
Oh, that's awesome. I always wanted to go to Chicago. I might take you up on that. That's so kind. Thank you.
Don't come in the winter, wait till the summer.
I know I'm just north of Toronto, and it's so cold here right now. It's like -30. It's like so cold. But thank you, Deborah, again. And it was so lovely to meet you. Thanks for helping all of us. And I'm sure there are people out there that are listening to this that are if they that say, I'm going to try this for myself, but I'm also going to maybe share this with my sister who is also feeling, maybe I can help her, or share this with more people, so that, because maybe you can take something away, but a friend of yours is needing the same message and they can take something else away from it, right?
Definitely. And just like pay attention. I want to tell everybody, pay attention to your life, to how you feel. And that's so important. You can choose feeling good.
There's another quote right there. You can choose feeling good with Deborah. I love it. I love it so much. I'm going to quote you so much on this episode. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe or leave a review. See you next week on the Giving Starts With You podcast.